Hello, everyone. I'm back with a book. It is a new book. It is called My Dog Skip by Willie Morris. If you have any other books that you want me to read, feel free to comment down below because I would love to read your books. So, yeah, let's get started. So, the first page, Chapter 1, A Faded Photograph. I came across a photograph of him not long ago. His black face with a long snout, sniffing at something in the air. His tail straight and pointing, his eyes flashing in some momentary excitement. Looking at a faded photograph, taken more than 40 years before, even as a grown man, I would admit, I still missed him. It was 1943. I was 9 years old and in the 3rd grade when I first saw him for the very first time. I had known we were getting him. My father had ordered him from a dog breeder he had heard about in Springfield, Missouri. Daddy had picked him up at the Illinois Central train depot, and when I came back home that day from school, he had just put the wire portable kennel on our back porch. I opened the door to the box and looked inside. I saw a puppy drinking water from a container attached to the bottom. He glanced up at me. "Come here, boy," I said. He walked on unsteady legs towards me. I was sitting on the floor of the porch when he came out. He jumped into my lap and began nuzzling my hand with his nose. When I leaned toward him, he gave me the moist lick on my chin. Then he hugged me. I led him into the house and gave him some puppy food in the dish. Then I followed him as he gingerly explored every room in the house. That night, he jumped into my bed and stared at me, as if he were looking me over. Then, perhaps because he missed his mother in Missouri, he went to sleep in my arms. I was only a child, and he now was an only dog. This was the first of our many days and years together. We named him Skipper, for the lively way he walked, but he always just skipped me. We had a whole string of dogs before. When I was a very little boy, we had big bird dogs, and then 2 purebred English smooth-haired fox terriers, like this one. And I got to know all about dogs, a most precious expert, their funny or crazy moods, how they looked when they were hungry or sick, when they were ready to bite, and when they were their growling meant nothing. What they might be trying to say when they moaned and made a strange human noise deep in their throats. None of those other dogs ever came up to this one. You could talk to him as well as you could to many human beings, and much better than you could to someone. He would sit down and look you straight in the eye, a long, mesmerizing gaze, and when he understood what you were saying, he would turn his head sideways, back and forth, oscillating his whole body like a pendulum on a clock. Before going to sleep at night, with him sitting next to my face on the bed, as he always did with such hours, I would say, "First thing tomorrow, I want you to get your leash and then come get me up, because we're going to get in the car and go out to the woods and get some squirrels." And the next morning, sure enough, he would get his leash, wake up both my father and me, walk nervously around the house with the leash in his mouth while we ate breakfast, and then lead us out to the car. Or I could say, "How about a little swim?" And his face would light up and he would push open the back door with his paws and escort me the quarter of a mile down the back alleyway to the swimming hole under the cypress near the bayou. Or, "Bubba's coming over here today and we're going to play some football." And he would listen closely to this and go out and wave around in the front of the house and pick up Bubba's scent a block down the street, and he'll come tell me that he's on his way. Or, "Skip, how about some catch?" And he would get up and walk into the front room, open the door in the antique cabinet with his improbable nose and bring me his tennis ball. I watched him grow from a puppy who came to us from Missouri to the sleek, dexterous, affectionate creature who could do all these things and more. He knew my father by the name of Big Boss, my mother as Bosie, and I was Little Boss, or interchangeably Willie. I called him, depending on my mood, Skip, Old Skip, and Boy. I have learned that when you love somebody, you address them or her by different names. Sometimes my father would hide in the closet and I would ask, Skip, where's Big Boss? And he would search the whole house, looking on every bed and under every chair and table until he arrived at the right closet and began scratching with his paws. The old town where Skip and I grew up together, there was an unhurried and isolated place then. About 10,000 people lived there, of all races and origins, and it sat there crazily, half on steep hills and half on flat delta. Some of the streets were not paved, and the main street, stretching its several blocks from the Dixie Theater down to the bend in the river, was narrow and plain, but down along the quiet, shady streets with their magnolia and pecan and elm and locust trees, where the stately old house that had been built long before the Civil War, slightly dark and decaying until the descendants became prosperous enough to have them resorted, which usually meant one coat of white enamel. All this was before the big supermarkets and shopping centers and affluent subdivisions with no sidewalks and the monster highways and the innocent loss. It was even before there was television and people could not close their doors and shut their curtains to watch the quiz games or the comedy hours or the talk shows where everybody talks at once. We could sit out on our front porches in the hot, serene night and say hello to everyone who walked by. If a fire truck came past, we got in our cars to follow it, and Skip was always the first to want to go. The houses were set out in a line under the soft green trees, their leaves rustling gently with the breeze. From the river sometimes came the melancholy echo of a boat's horn. I knew the place then better than I did my own heart. Every bend and every road, every house and every field, the exact spot where the robin went for her first crocus. It was not in my soul then, only in my pores, as familiar to me as rain or grass or sunlight. The town was poor one year and rich the next. Everything in it pertained to cotton, and hence the usury, the mortgage, debenture, and labor. We lived and died by nature and followed the whims of the timeless clouds. Our people played 7 cards stuck against God. It was a sly and silent town then, and Skip and my friends and I absorbed every rhythm and heartbeat and the slightest sounds from far away. I loved those funny silences. The whole town was also abundant with alleys behind the paved thoroughfares inherent from earlier day. Little vagrant pathways running with scant design or reason behind the houses and stores and barns and chicken yards and gardens. You could get away with anything in those alleys. How Skip adored the freedom of them. It was a lazy town, all stretched out on its hills and its flat streets, and over the years, Skip also grew to know almost every house, tree, street, and alley. Occasionally, he wandered around the town by himself, and everybody of any consequence knew who he was. Unbelievable as this many seem, Skip had the most curious and spooky ways of sensing, don't ask me how, where I might be at any given moment, and what a later day called ESP. Our neighborhood was one of the 4 thoroughfares. In our side yard was a row of immense pecan trees, shaped at the top like witches' caps, and in the back a huge field, vined and bosky. On the front lawn was a full towering oak, one of Skip's favorite trees in the entire town. Every time I shouted "squirrel," Skip would charge on the oak tree and try to climb it. Sometimes getting as high as 5 or 6 feet was his spectacular leaps. This would stop traffic on the street in the front of our house. People in cars would see him trying to shiny up the tree and would pull on the curb and watch. They would signal to other passerby and point towards Skip, and these people would pull over too. They would gaze up into the tree and see what he was looking for, and after a respectable pause ask me, "What's he got up there?" And I would say, "Something small and mean." They seldomly recognized that Skip was just practicing. This exercise was nothing to compare with football games. However, I cut the lace on a football and taught old Skip how to carry it with his mouth, and how to hold it so he could avoid fumbles when he was tackled. I instructed him how to move a quarterback signals, to take a snap from center on the first bounce, and to follow me down the field. 10 or 12 of my comrades and I would organize a game of tackle in my front yard. Our side would go into a huddle. Skip included that we would put our arms around one another's shoulders, the way he did in real huddles at Ole Miss or Tennessee. And the dog would stand up on his hind legs, and with me kneeling, drape a leg around my shoulder. Then I would say, "Skip, pattern 39 off on 3. He would break out the huddle with Skip, dropping into tailback position, and as I taught him. Mutton Head or Pee-wee or Henji or Buddha or Big Boy or Ralph would be in the center, and I would station myself as quarterback and say, "Ready, set, 1, 2, 3. Then a center would snap the ball on a hop to Skip, who would get it by a lace and follow me downfield. Dodging would be tacklers with no effort at all, weaving behind his blockers, spinning loose when he was cornered, sometimes balancing just inside the sidelines he made to the end zone. We would slap him on the back and say nonchalantly, 'Good run, boy.' Or when we had an audience, 'Did you see my block back there?' Occasionally, he would get tackled, but he seldom lost his grip on the ball, and he would always get up from the bottom of the pile and head straight for the huddle. He was an ideal safety man, and when the other side punted, he would get a grip on the second or third loop hop and gallop the length of the field for a touchdown. After considerable practice, I succeeded in teaching him the Statue of Liberty. Play always shouting Statue of Liberty to him, and our teammates before he played unfolded. I would take the snap from center and fade back in a row crouch, less a crouch than a 45-degree list, holding a ball behind my shoulder as if I were about to pass, all the while making sure the loosened lace was a convenient angle. Skip, stationed on the left end position, would circle around behind me, taking the lace of pigskin behind his teeth, then moving the deft assurance toward the right side of the line of scrimmage, where I was leading interference, whereupon he would follow his usual phalanx of blockers to the enemy's end zone for another spectacular score. "Look at that, dog playing football," somebody passing by would shout, and before the game was over, we would have an incredulous crowd watching from cars or sitting on the sidelines, just as they did when he was after squirrels. The older men especially enjoyed this stunning spectacle, walking down the sidewalk in front of the house, when they would stop and let go of the great whoops of astonishment. "Man, that's some dog. can he catch a pass? For simple gratification, however, I believe Skip enjoyed most imaginative intrigue above any other, and there are people still living in town who will testify to it. In that place and time, we began driving our parents' cars when we were 13 years old. This was common practice then, and the town was so small the policemen knew who you were. In our family, although they of course expected you to be careful, when I started driving our old 4-door green DeSoto, I always took Skip on my trips around town. He rode with his snout extended far out the window, and if he caught the scent of one boy we knew, he would bark and point toward him. And we would stop and give the person a free ride. Skip would shake our hands with our mutual friends and lick him on the face and sit on the front seat between us. Cruising through the fingers of town, I would spot a group of old men standing around up the road. I would get Skip to prop himself against the steering wheel, his black head peering out of the window shield, while I crouched out of sight under the dashboard, slowing the car to 10 or 15. I would guide the steering wheel with my right hand, while Skip with his paw kept it steady. As we drove by the Blue Font Cafe, I could hear one of the men shout, "Look at that old dog driving a car!" Later, we would ride out into the countryside, past the cotton fields, the pecan groves, and winding little creek on the dark flat land toward some somnolent hamlet consisting of 3 or 4 unpainted stores, a minuscule wooden post office with a porch stacked with firewood in the winter time, and a little graveyard nearby. Here, the old men in overalls would be sitting on the gallery of the general store with patent medicine posters on its sides, whittling wood or dipping snuff of wadding flies. When we slowly came past with Skip behind the steering wheel, I heard one of them yell, a dog driving!" And when I glanced slightly above the dashboard, I sighted him falling out of his chair over the side of the porch into a privet hedge. One afternoon, not long after that, Henjin and Skip and I were out about in the same country vicinity when far up the gravel road we saw a substantial congregation of humanity emerging from the Black Woods Church after a revival meeting. A number of the people, in fact, were still shouting and wailing as they approached their dusty parked cars and pickup trucks. I stopped the car and placed Skip in his familiar spot behind the steering wheel. Then we slowly continued up the road. As we passed the church, in the midst of the avid canopy, a woman exclaimed, "Is that a dog driving that car?" The ensuing silence as we progressed on by was the most horrendous, swift, and pervasive, and that suddenly Bakulik hush and quell remained unforgettable for me, as if the very spectacle of old Skip driving the green DeSoto were inscrutable, celestial, and preordained. And that was the end of chapter 1. That was a very long chapter. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Give this video a like, subscribe down below, comment down below what books you want me to read, and stay tuned for chapter 2. Bye!